Hello everybody, I am the Linkzilla. This is going to be a very impromptu, very unscripted video because I just got back from seeing Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom in theaters. If you can't tell by that little slip-up, the title of this movie just makes me want to say The Lost World, and that is for good reason, in more ways than one, which we'll get to throughout the movie. This really was... Before we basically begin, I just want to say that I just want to state my feelings on the movie now that I've actually seen it, and it's going to be completely spoiler-free. I'm not going to ruin anything for you. I just want to put my own personal feelings on the movie out there, and I gotta say that, for those of you who might be worried that this film is getting negative reviews online, especially from other internet reviewers who are basically, denouncing this movie for being yet another crappy Jurassic Park sequel, well, those are the people that you can ignore, alright? Because I guarantee you that not only is this movie great, but it's keeping in line perfectly with what the Jurassic Park franchise has always been, and most importantly, as I said in my last video, this was the movie where all of the dangers of Jurassic Park, the danger that misusing genetic engineering technology that Ian Malcolm warned us about, this is the movie where it all comes true. Literally speaking, this is the personification of Michael Crichton's original fears for what Jurassic Park represented when he wrote that novel Holy crap. He wrote the novel nearly 30 years ago at this point. Wow. That is heavy. I think that I'm gonna have to, have a new celebration in light of that, but here, in order to keep with the point of what I'm trying to say is that, for those of you who are a bit curious about my last video, talking about my feelings about Jurassic World, how I talked about the fears of this movie, I sort of have different fears, because ultimately, what I knew was going to happen in the movie did end up happening, and that is completely beyond my control. I was sad about what happened, but in a lot of ways, the fears that I have aren't necessarily fears, they're just a dread of the inevitable expectations of it. My true fears for this movie came from all the people who are posting either average or horrible reviews of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and ultimately speaking, seeing those reviews, it just leaves me completely reaffirmed in my knowledge that the people who are making these videos critiquing the movie, they never once got it. They never once understood what Jurassic Park is, and what it was meant to be, what it represents, and what these new movies are trying to do. Especially because, I'm almost convinced that my theory that I established in the last video, that Fallen Kingdom was the movie that the new trilogy wanted to start out on. We wanted to start with Fallen Kingdom in order to explore the consequences of Jurassic Park as quickly as possible, but we needed Jurassic World in order to set the stage. That's ultimately confirmed in my beliefs, because Colin Trevorrow, the guy who directed Jurassic World and will be directing Jurassic World 3 when it comes out, he stated that the lunchroom scene from the original movie, where Ian is warning about the danger that the misuse of scientific genetic engineering technology that John Hammond has put on display, when it comes to fruition, that was the scene that inspired all of the Jurassic World trilogy. So, it literally lends credence to the idea that it's all been building up to this, and now we're gonna deal with the fallout of it. Now, ultimately speaking, in order to talk about the movie itself, that's what I ultimately feared it would be, is that it would basically, much like Jurassic World, I feared that it would be a sequel that didn't understand the true heart of Jurassic World and was just another generic Run from Dinosaurs movie, especially because the trailers set this movie up to be undoubtedly the scariest and most tense and most emotional movie of the Jurassic Park franchise, but in a lot of ways, the keen observer of the movie, of these trailers, someone who actually knows the ins and outs of the franchise from all facets, and not the superficial movie critics that are denouncing this movie, they can actually see that this movie is literally the most thought-provoking movie in the entire franchise. And that's ultimately why people don't like The Lost World Jurassic Park so much, because that movie is incredibly thought-provoking, and yet because so many people refuse to actually think about it, they just assume that it's an environmental message being shoved down their throats, when in reality, the environmental people get punished in the movie as well. Like I said before, the Jurassic Park franchise is all about people making bad decisions because they can't foresee the inevitable consequences. When it comes to the antagonists of the movie, the reason why they don't foresee the consequences is because they are blinded by the enormous dollar symbols attached to the decisions that they are making. But however, whenever we have a character in these movies that makes a bad decision like that, they always get punished for it. Here, with Jurassic World, as well as one character in the original Jurassic Park and the main characters of The Lost World, we have the protagonists who are the ones making the bad decisions, and yet we've barely ever seen them get punished for it. Not so much with this movie. This movie is literally all about the main protagonists making the bad decisions this time, in tandem with the antagonists making the bad decisions, and now, the way that the movie ends sets the stage for how they themselves are going to deal with those consequences, and how those consequences are going to be dished out onto them. Literally speaking, that's all I can really say about the movie at that point. It gets a little bit crazy there at the end. But if you've been paying attention to the trailers like I have, you ultimately know exactly where this is going. So, anyways, that's what's so intriguing about the Jurassic Park franchise, because the series has protagonists, and the series has antagonists, but literally speaking, there's no black and white in this area. There's no clear-cut hero or villain. There are people who do bad things, but some of them are doing bad things for the right reasons. So there are also people who are doing bad things for bad reasons. There are people who are doing good things for good reasons, and there are people who are doing good things for bad reasons. Ultimately speaking, that's where the spectrum of the entire Jurassic Park franchise lies. No one is exactly morally clean in this franchise, not even Dr. Grant in a lot of ways. Literally speaking, everybody who is involved in this franchise, all of the main characters, they are all responsible for this in some way. Even the guy who I've repeatedly said is the smartest character in the entire franchise, Dr. Ian Malcolm, not even he is completely innocent of the tragedy that happened at Jurassic Park, especially not in the novel, where his genius actually was able to shine. The idea behind it is that he managed to predict that the park was inevitably going to fail, come crashing down, and result in not only catastrophic failure, but enormous magnitudes of collateral damage, which include a danger to human life. But throughout the novel, instead of actually explaining when and where it was going to happen, as he predicted, or better yet, giving suggestions as to how the problems and flaws in the system could be fixed, he thought that it would be funnier to gloat about it and then wait to collect more evidence just to show off that he was right. So literally speaking, no one in this franchise is 100% morally clean. And that's what this movie explores. The idea that the people that we're supposed to be rooting for are the people who are making the wrong decisions this time, just like how in The Lost World. Now don't get me wrong, most of the decisions made in The Lost World were actually the right decisions, but the things that people complain about most of all, particularly regarding the third act, that stuff is actually supposed to have been the wrong decision, and the characters themselves see the consequences of what they've done, and the one character that caused it all, he feels a heavy responsibility for it. He is absolutely defeated by what he allowed to happen. But in order to keep in line with what Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is, before this ultimately comes onto a pointless rant, this is what the movie is trying to do. It's trying to basically establish that the people who are a part of this, they're not 100% morally clean. Everyone is accountable for the danger and the destruction that the Jurassic Park franchise is going to cause. And believe you me, the damage that has been caused in this movie is irreparable. There is literally no going back at this point. The only thing that mankind can hope to do at this point is try to survive. But I'm not going to spoil anything outside of what I've already spoiled. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what I feel the movie did, what I think that maybe it could have improved upon, and just give a general overall feelings on this movie. Now, on the whole, I can say that I believe that this is a great movie, and ultimately, I don't necessarily think it necessarily supplants any of the movies, supplants their placement in how I would rank them. I definitely think that it would be up there with the original Jurassic Park and The Lost World, but in a lot of ways, I like Jurassic World better than I like this movie. But that's ultimately, not a problem for me, because I never understood the concept of people wanting a sequel to a movie to be better than the original. I know that movies like Terminator 2, Aliens, and Empire Strikes Back exist, but those are very rare exceptions that can actually have negative impacts on the franchise, because even to this day, I prefer those movies instead of watching the original Terminator, the original Alien, and the original Star Wars. Sorry, but if what came after is better than what came before, there's less reason to go back and revisit what came before. That's why I feel like the original entries in the franchise need to remain stronger than their sequels. A sequel shouldn't overshadow its predecessor, because, ultimately speaking, what a sequel should do is continue on as a natural part of the first movie, to where you could almost make the argument that every single movie in a franchise is telling one long giant story, and in a lot of ways, with the exception of Jurassic Park 3, that is what the Jurassic Park franchise is doing, because we had humble beginnings that crashed and burned. We had the dream of Jurassic Park crashing down around us, and then we had a hope that the animals managed to survive. These beautiful creatures, without human interference, are thriving on another island, and they should just be left alone, because they don't need our help to survive, they need our absence. And that's the only way that mankind can peacefully share this planet with dinosaurs. De-extinct animals that, while not smarter than us, are definitely more superior to us. Especially, given the context of this movie, you'll find out why. But then, the series had its lowest point with Jurassic Park 3, but I think that there's an argument to be made that with the new canon established with Jurassic Park 3, that there's a little bit of a theme that's sort of, underlying Jurassic Park 3 that shows how the world reacts to the knowledge that dinosaurs have been de-extinct and exist in the world again. Especially considering that 3 years prior to this event, a bull Tyrannosaurus Rex was set loose in San Diego. Yeah, that's honestly the biggest surprising thing about the new Jurassic World movies, is the fact that Jurassic Park 3 and the Lost World Jurassic Park were not overwritten. They are still in canon. And that's what I think is, incredible, because I thought for sure that Jurassic World was a reboot, and it was just going to completely ignore the other movies. But moving on. So then, we had a period of calm as the world tries to adjust to this news, and then suddenly, we had a new high, with Jurassic World opening its doors and being a successful theme park, bringing in hundreds of thousands of people a day, and that continued on for 10 years, but then inevitably, because of the unethical business practices exhibited by theme parks, which Michael Crichton was making a commentary on in the original Jurassic World, in the original Jurassic Park. Oh god, now I'm doing it. Jurassic World eventually suffered catastrophic failure, and the damages were of a collateral nature, including the loss of human life. So now, we have a world that is the post-Jurassic World, and how these animals should be treated, how the public views them, especially after the catastrophe at Jurassic World completely overshadows what happened at Jurassic Park. At Jurassic Park, a maximum of 4 people were killed. At Jurassic World, hundreds, thousands of people died. So, of course, how are the public going to treat these animals now? There are people who are saying, destroy them. They're living man-eaters. Let them die. There are also people who are saying, no, they're beautiful creatures and they're here because of us. They're our responsibility. We should protect them. We can't just let them go extinct like this. And that's what's so brilliant about it, because of these conflicting points of view, and the lack of an easy answer, the lack of an easy way out, to the point where even I'm conflicted on where I stand on the whole let them live, let them die debate, that it legitimately comes off like this is a representation of a real world. That the people in this world are real and alive, and their opinions are just as important as ours, because it's an actual functioning debate. And this is like why I love the moral dilemma of what this movie represents, and why I say that it's probably one of the smarter Jurassic Park movies that has been made as of late. So, but now I'm going to talk about certain things about the movie itself. So, I gotta admit that even though I've been saying that the trailers gave too much of the movie away, I was actually surprised, as, believe it or not, most of what we see in the trailers is actually all said and done within the first 40 minutes of the movie. I was genuinely surprised, because, I would think that, at least the portion of the movie that I'm talking about, I'm being as vague as possible, I thought that would, at least take up maybe the first hour, maybe the first hour and a half, and then the movie would switch to our final setting for the climax, the last 45 minutes or so, but we actually got there a lot sooner than I expected, and there were just so many layers of this movie. Now, ultimately, I do feel like certain things could have been improved, let's just say that the new characters that were established in this movie, well, let's just knock these out, as easy as possible. Thankfully, there was only one SJW moment in this movie, and the SJW-isms were directed at an actual antagonist of the movie, so thankfully, the attitude that the character displayed was directed at the correct person instead of one of the protagonists, like Disney is doing. So that's something that I had to be thankful for. Her character ultimately didn't really feel all that much fleshed out outside of that character, but she did have an important role to play. Although, truth be told, I could kind of forget that she even existed at times. Speaking of forgetting that characters existed at times, there was another character who I was certain that I was going to hate because the trailers made him seem so annoying, and yeah, I actually did end up hating him. But the thing about him is that, even though he does, technical things, technologically important things for the movie, his role in the movie ultimately seems just like a superficial comic relief that is so easily forgotten about. He literally disappears from the movie for about 20 minutes until he randomly shows back up again. So it's yeah. Honestly, though, I didn't hate him as much as I thought I would. Because, everything that we saw of him in the trailers happened in the first 40 minutes of the movie, it was easy to get past. Now, then there's another character. I think that basically, let's just say that this character has somewhat been, a hot topic when the new Jurassic World movie came out 3 years ago, and, what they did with this character, so we were all expecting him to die in this movie, and he does get taken out, but the way he gets taken out is, like, so quick and so clean that you have to wonder if he's actually dead, or if he was just, like, tranquilized, because I just think that, like, it just wasn't really the kind of way that you would kill off a character like this. Especially since, like, considering the way the movie ends, he has to have a role in the next movie in order to continue the chaos, because that's what this franchise in and of itself is kind of all about. The chaos continues. And then there's the one character that everybody has been speculating on since this character was announced, and I gotta admit that some of our theories about who this character was and what he was going to be, they were actually pretty spot on, but I can't help but feel like they didn't go far enough with him. I don't really want to spoil it or anything, but I felt like their messages were a bit conflicted, like they were planning to have him be this direction, but at the last minute they changed it to like, no, we can't do that, let's just turn it around. And I know that certain people are going to make a criticism that this character is actually supposed to be this character, but because the actor who played that character died in between movies, they couldn't bring this character back, and like, no, guys, just shut up. You don't know what you are talking about, literally speaking, because this character has so many references to the novel that you don't know about, so just shut your mouths about that. And that's what I also liked about this character. That's what I liked about this movie, because there were so many references to the original Jurassic Park novel, even to the point where Dr. Malcolm was given one of his most iconic lines from the novel that has never before made it into the movies. The idea of a paradigm shift, a major change in our scientific understanding of the world. Basically speaking, these paradigm shifts are a lot like death. You don't know what it looks like until you're on the other side. Something like that. I don't know. So, this movie comes off as a gratefully respected piece that basically, like, appreciates the lore of the franchise from all facets, not just the movies, but also the novels as well. So that's why I have to respect this movie, because it showed a lot of things that were basically, like, in keeping with the tone of the novel. And that's what I feel like some people, like, don't give the franchise enough credit for, because the novel is one of the smartest things that's ever been written by man, and to not read the novel, you're basically, like, missing out on a whole fresh perspective that the movies have only just barely scratched the surface of. And that's ultimately what I'm hoping for the most, that as the movies continue, if they continue past Jurassic World 3, which I hope beyond hope that they do, because I want more Jurassic in my life. I want more Jurassic Park. I don't want the dream to end just yet. If they do continue, I want them to explore the deeper meanings and messages in the novel. I want Malcolm to have his unending supply of long-winded but thought-provoking speeches and lectures. Listening to that guy talk on the Jurassic Park audiobook is a treat, and I love it every single time. He is definitely the smartest character that the movie has ever made, and unfortunately, he's the smartest character in the novel, but unfortunately, the original movie sort of portrayed him as a caricature of what he is, and he never rose up to that intellectual standard that he is in the novel. But now that we are in this new age of Jurassic Park movies, he's finally starting to resemble the character that he's supposed to be. Now, there are a few things that I feel like could have been improved about the movies. Like, I would go as far as to say that, much like I suspected from the trailers, the pacing can be a little bit off, which is a problem with this movie, because, believe it or not, there's not much in terms of dinosaur action in this movie. You would think that there would be, based on, like, how much of the trailers we saw, but it kind of, like, has to build up to that point. When it gets going, it, like, comes at you so much, like, so much information hitting your brain at once, it's, like, hard to manage. But I think that in the rather slower, more talky areas, they could have had a bit more pacing. And I feel like the movie sort of missed an opportunity because, well, let's just say that, like, when it comes to the later portion of the movie, there are going to be people interested in getting their hands on the dinosaurs for their own purposes. I feel like they missed an opportunity to name drop one of the companies that was trying to appear at the climax just for this very thing. Biosyn. That's all I'm going to say about that, is that Biosyn was the rival company that Lewis Dodson, the guy who paid Nedry in the first movie, was representing. To have Biosyn come back after all this time, I literally would have cheered in the theater to hear that, because ultimately it shows that, yeah, we are definitely exploring the novel a whole lot more. We're referencing it, and we're finally bringing the lost, forgotten stories that were left out of the movie adaptations of the novels to life. Because that's ultimately what the Jurassic Park franchise is doing with the new Jurassic World novels. Like, the original 2 movies, Jurassic Park and Lost World, they are great, but they leave out so much good stuff from the novels that you realize that there isn't enough room in the movies to tell every single piece of information, every single plot point from the original novels, so you have to spread them out a bit more. This whole thing, it's all Jurassic Park. It is all an adaptation of the Jurassic Park novels and the Lost World novel in its own way. And so that's what this entire franchise is representing, and that's how I feel about it. Now, in regards to a certain plot twist that came up later on, in regards to another character that we've been speculating on, how I felt like they should have done more with his character, I mentioned how they seemed a bit confused about what he is, who he is, what he has done, because they tried to paint him one way, but he ended up in a completely different way. I can't help but feel like a big reveal that the movie was leading up to wasn't exactly warranted, and for someone who only appreciates these movies superficially, it kind of comes out of left field. Even I had to tilt my head at it. It's like one of the most head-tilting plot points of the entire franchise, in my opinion, but I actually am going to give it the green light. I am going to allow them to do this. Why? Because literally speaking, it keeps in line with the message of Jurassic Park. The fact that genetic power is the most awesome force the planet has ever seen, and yet the people who have control of that power are misusing it. They are mishandling it, they're abusing it, they are treating it like a kid who has found his dad's gun. And that's ultimately what this character did, and that's ultimately like where another morally gray line is drawn, because what exactly is the difference between what this guy did and John Hammond cloning extinct animals and bringing them back to life? Where exactly is the moral line drawn? How exactly did this cause a split between them? I can understand from John Hammond's perspective, but it goes to show that there's no clear-cut answer. There's no clean way out of this. There's no easy way out. There's no shortcut home. I'm sorry about that. Not sorry about that. I'm not sorry about that at all. Now, I mentioned how I wanted Biosyn to be name-dropped. I mentioned that plot point. Now I basically, I can't help but feel like, with these new trilogies, even though they are being respectful of what the franchise was before, they are moving the focus more and more away from the series mascot and shining it on something else. But they're not replacing the series mascot per se, they're just telling a different animal's story. They're telling it from a new perspective, and I don't know, I just sort of feel like maybe we could have gotten more with this particular character. I'm pretty sure you guys, know who I might be talking about, but for the story that we had to tell, it really was her story, so... But I actually kind of feel like they should have given her more screen time as well. I have to be as vague as possible about this, because I don't want to spoil anything, sorry, so... But, for what we got, I'm satisfied, because, I was just so intrigued by where the plot was going to go that I really actually do... I do recommend this movie, and I actually, was able to get past the lack of screen presence that other characters had. Much like with Jurassic World. Literally speaking, I was so on the edge of my seat in Jurassic World that I barely even realized that, oh my god, it's the climax and she hasn't even made an appearance yet. But that's when I ultimately realized that, oh yeah, she's coming. You always gotta have heroic moments like that. Not just to reference the original movie, but to also keep the heart of Jurassic Park itself as a franchise beating. Oh, and that's another thing that I want to mention. You remember how... Wait, I actually didn't bring this up in that video. Well, darn it. I'm just going to say it right now. There's actually a line of dialogue that addressed one of the things that I was afraid about the most with this new movie, especially taking into consideration that Jurassic Park was celebrating its 25th anniversary, and one of the characters in the movies was now 30 years old, and according to scientists, she should literally be at the end of her lifespan, meaning that she could very realistically die of old age, but they actually have a line of dialogue that somewhat explains that assumption is a bit incorrect. At least why it could be incorrect, because there are so many other variables that I didn't take into consideration that basically could prolong this creature's life. So, it's literally like everything that I was afraid of, the movie was taking care of. And that's so funny because they intentionally teased this information. They dropped this information specifically for people like me to overanalyze and get scared about, just so we could say, hey dude, relax, have a beer, it's okay, we've got this. Anyways, I think that maybe we've been going on for like half an hour now, so I better start wrapping this stuff up. What I can ultimately say is that every single emotional beat of this movie that I talked about in the last video, coming up and just hitting me hard in the feels, this movie did. This movie, it completely succeeded in doing. Especially, there's one scene that I guarantee is going to make you guys tear up. It's going to make you cry. And if you don't cry, I'm personally going to make sure that you cry. Because if you don't cry at this scene, you're probably heartless. I'm just going to say it. You are probably heartless, you're probably dead inside, and most of all, you have to keep in mind what you're seeing on the screen isn't necessarily something that's sad because it's someone dying. It's sad because it's your childhood that is also dying. That's what the entire purpose of my video last time was to talk about, my fears going up to this movie, because it's literally meant to be the death of our childhoods, and then exploring the consequences of where we stand in our adult lives now. So, that's ultimately why I feel that scene was so powerful. And I just had to cry at it. And it just has so much emotional impact on me that I'm still a little bit shaken by it. Admittedly, I thought that the movie was going to end with a twist that, sort of surreptitiously circumvented what I saw in the trailers, that maybe I had misunderstood what I was seeing in the trailers, but they kind of teased that twist, and I felt like they didn't give enough time for that twist to actually have an emotional impact before that twist is immediately undone, and I can't help but feel like the character who did it really was the character who shouldn't have done it, because even though it sort of keeps in line with what this character is, I just can't help but feel like maybe it should have been somebody else who had done it, I don't know, a villain or something, because it's literally at that last moment where our characters, our protagonists, make the right decision, and yet it's immediately undone anyway, so it's like, yeah, that was kind of pointless. But anyways, on the whole, I can say that I am undoubtedly satisfied with this movie, especially because it has its tear-jerking moments, and despite the fact that it actually has some of the more tense and scarier moments of Jurassic Park as a franchise, it actually has some of the cutest moments of the Jurassic Park franchise as well. They somehow managed to make dangerous dinosaurs, the dinosaurs that can hurt you, incredibly cute. And the movie has its sense of humor carried over from Jurassic World, and it's actually really good. I felt like what they didn't go too far with it, and it was actually enjoyable for what it is. And I can personally say that one of my biggest fears about what this movie was going to be was that I felt like the concept of what the Indoraptor was going to be was a little too premature. I thought that they should have saved the Indoraptor for part 3 so that we could have that as the big finale, but the reason why I was so afraid of it is because I thought it was just going to be a retread of what the Indominus Rex ended up being, and I can't go into details, but I can certainly tell you that no, it's definitely not a retread of what the Indominus ended up being, because it is so much more, and damn, that creature. You guys seriously need to see the movie. You need to actually experience what that animal is for yourselves, because I literally can't talk about it and do it justice. At least not without going into spoilers. So, that's initially my thoughts on Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, having just come off the movie. I highly recommend it. You guys, anybody who's listening to this, don't be afraid of the negative criticisms that this movie is getting, and don't be afraid to voice your own opinions on it. Basically speaking, there's no easy way out. There's no clear-cut answer, but and that basically is keeping with the series franchise as well as the criticisms that it's receiving, but I truly respect what this movie is doing, and I honestly think that it's one of the best, most thought-provoking movies that we have had in years, especially considering that the movies nowadays usually just involve superheroes, giant robots, or spaceships blowing up. This movie is one that's actually going to make you think, and it's going to make you feel, and you should respect that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope that you all keep in mind that even in our darkest moments, if we can just trust in nature, life will find a way. I am the Linkzilla. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, please like it, share it with your friends, and leave a comment down in the comment section below. Be sure to smash that subscribe button to keep up to date on more Jurassic World news coming your way, possibly a review of Jurassic World itself, and a review of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom once enough time has passed. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next video. Later.